Chapter 872. This time, they were really being targeted. However, they weren't being targeted by the enchantants, but by the people who were running for their lives. This person had obviously discovered Jing Yu's group. He screamed for help as he chased after Jing Yu's group. Behind this person were hundreds of enchantants. This momentum wasn't ordinary. As Jing Yu ran, she suddenly felt that the sounds behind her were getting louder. There were originally over 100 of them, but in the process of running, their numbers had inexplicably increased again. Jing Yu was about to go crazy when she saw this scene. "We can't go any further." To the left. Xiang Xing was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat as he shouted, "Why can't we go any further?" Jing Yu looked at the vast area in front of her. There seemed to be mountains and rocks in front of them. It should be easier to shake them off, but Xiang Xing didn't let Jing Yu run forward. Instead, he led Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan to the side. "We can't go any further," Xiang Xing said as he ran. "I've never seen anyone who went and come out. It's a forbidden area in the Black Soil Zone." When Jing Yu heard this, she turned her head and glanced at that place. She frowned slightly. She followed Xiang Xing and turned left and right. After walking several roads, she didn't know where they had turned to. Finally, she shook off the people behind her. However, Jing Yu's group didn't dare to stop. They ran straight for a long distance. When they couldn't take it anymore, they sat on the ground, panting. "Oh my God, this is killing me." Jing Yu felt that it was difficult to breathe. She panted and adjusted her breathing, controlling her heartbeat and recovering her strength. Shangguan Linglan's face was pale from running. "The three of you are very knowledgeable." Just as Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan were resting, a cold voice suddenly sounded in their ears. Jing Yu trembled and turned her head to look in the direction of the darkness. "You have to hide your head and show your tail. Show yourself." Jing Yu's hand secretly touched her waist. She narrowed her eyes and looked into the darkness. A man dressed in black slowly moved out of the darkness. "Hee. Miss, you don't have to be nervous. I'm just out to meet an acquaintance," the man said as he slowly stopped and raised his face. The moment his face appeared, Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan were stunned. "Holy shit, why are there two Xiangxings?" The man in black was dressed in black and held a long sword. This situation stunned Jing Yu. "Big brother." When Xiang Xing saw the person who walked out, his body trembled slightly. Then, he lowered his head silently like a child who had been caught red-handed. "You broke the oath." The man in black turned his gaze to Xiang Xing. His eyes were calm and emotionless. He looked at Xiang Xing as if he was looking at a stranger, but Xiang Xing called him big brother. Xiang Xing's heart trembled. He pursed his lips and didn't say anything. "I forced him to come in." Jing Yu watched the interaction between the two and raised her eyebrows slightly. She stood up and said, "I tied him up and brought him in. If you have anything to say it to me." "You? Tied him up?" The man in black heard Jing Yu's words and his face turned cold. Chapter 873. "No, I came here on my own accord." The black-clothed man's expression changed. When Xiang Xing heard Jing Yu's words, he looked at the man and hurriedly said, "She didn't tie me up. I came here on my own accord." As Xiang Xing spoke, he silently took a step forward and blocked Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan. Jing Yu was slightly taken aback by Xiang Xing's action. She looked at Xiang Xing in confusion. "Why did Jing Yu have a strange feeling? What did you come here for?" The black-clothed man glanced at Xiang Xing, and his expression softened slightly. He narrowed his eyes at Xiang Xing and said coldly, "Didn't I say that you're not allowed to come to the Blacklands again?" I miss Big Brother." Xiang Xing lowered his head sadly and looked carefully at the black-clothed man. He said, "Big brother, we haven't seen each other in 5 years." After hearing Xiang Xing's words, the black-clothed man's heart suddenly trembled, and his gaze towards Xiang Xing fluctuated a little. "What are you doing here?" He wasn't asking Xiang Xing this question, but Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan. He looked at Jing Yu inquisitively, and his brows were slightly furrowed in displeasure. "We're looking for someone." Jing Yu pursed her lips and replied calmly, "Looking for someone?" The man frowned when he heard this, seemingly very puzzled. Only Xiang Xing is allowed to come in to look for you. And we're not allowed to come in to look for someone? Jingyu crossed her arms and looked at the man in front of her. Besides, the Blacklands isn't anyone's private property. Why can't we come in? When the man heard Jingyu's words, his face darkened slightly. He narrowed his eyes coldly and said, "Since you're looking for someone, then go ahead. Xiang Xing, come with me." But, big brother. When Xiang Xing heard this, he immediately frowned and looked at the man in black with a wronged expression. "I owe these two sisters money. I can only leave after I promise to help them find the person they're looking for." Xiang Xing. The man's face filled with anger, and he glared at Xiang Xing coldly. "Big brother, I was wrong." Xiang Xing lowered his head sadly. When Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan heard the conversation between Xiang Xing and the black-clothed man, they blinked in confusion. Xiang Xing had a chance to run, but he didn't? Sigh, forget it. The man in black sighed deeply. Finally, he stared at Xiang Xing and asked, "How much do you owe them?" Cough. Xiang Xing coughed and said softly, "It should be 26 pieces of gold leaves." When the man heard this, his originally expressionless face suddenly widened. Jingyu could almost see the man's eyes turn red when he heard this number. His trembling hands made Jingyu even more suspicious. Would this person not be able to control himself and chop his own brother to death? Cough, cough. Jingyu coughed and broke the silence. "Then, I'll give you a discount. If you can take out 20 pieces of gold leaves now, we'll call it quits." Jingyu smiled faintly at the man in front of her. When the man heard this, his expression became slightly awkward. For people like them who had been in the Blacklands for a long time, how could they have so many gold leaves? To them, what they needed more was food and weapons, not money. Now that Jingyu suddenly asked him to take out so many things, he couldn't do it at all. Chapter 874. I'll repay Xiang Xing's debt. The man took a deep breath and said calmly, "I can't give you the golden leaf, but I can guarantee your safety out of the black dirt zone." Ha ha ha. I like straightforward people like you. This was the effect Jingyu wanted. Now that she heard the man's words, she immediately agreed to the deal. The original group of 3 became a group of 4 in the blink of an eye. Well, there was one more wooden person in the group. Hey, what's your big brother's background? Jingyu carefully pulled Xiang Xing to the side and asked in a low voice. My big brother is amazing. As soon as Xiang Xing mentioned his big brother, he began to talk nonstop. He looked at Jingyu proudly and said, My big brother is the only one who could escape from the Black Qilin. Moreover, my big brother's biggest goal is to kill the people of the Southeast Prefecture with his own hands. Xiang Xing said proudly, kill the people of the Southeast Prefecture? Just how great of a grudge do you have with the people of the Southeast Prefecture? Jingyu's mouth twitched as she looked at Xiang Xing with a conflicted expression. Isn't it because... Xiang Xing opened his mouth to speak. Xiang Xing, the man in black behind him coldly called out with a warning. Xiang Xing immediately shrunk his head and followed the man in black with his head lowered. He didn't dare to speak anymore. TSK. He's comparable to Xiao Chan. Jingyu looked at the man and silently stuck out her tongue. She turned around and continued walking. The man in black was Xiang Xing's twin brother. However, Aunt Yin knew that the two weren't born at the same time. They were 10 years apart in age, but they still had the same face. Jingyu simply couldn't explain this situation. Not long after Xiang Xing was born, the two brothers' mother passed away. The man in black was called Xiang Tian. He was quite domineering. Have you really seen that group of people? Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan finally got some information about General Shangguan. Xiang Tian brought Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan to a rock. Behind the rock, there was a man leaning against the rock to rest. Obviously, this person was someone Xiang Tian knew. This young master is the most informed person in the Black Soil region. The man didn't look old and had a ruffian aura. He was eating, and his shrewd eyes were sizing up Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan. Hee. If you don't believe me, why don't I guess your identity? The man grinned as he stared at Jingyu. The way he stared at Jingyu was as if he was staring at a treasure. Take your eyes back, or I'll gouge them out. Jing Yu's face darkened as she glared at the man. Hiss! Zhang Hua raised his head at the right time and let out a hissing sound. The man's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly took a step back. He looked at Jing Yu with some fear, and then silently turned his head towards the sky. Big brother Xiang Tian, do you know who you've brought to me? The man looked at Xiang Tian with a conflicted expression. I don't care. Xiang Tian's gaze landed on Jing Yu's face. In the end, he turned his head and said indifferently. Chapter 875. Okay. The man's eyes widened when he heard Xiang Tian's words. He took a deep breath and said, I saw the people you just mentioned. I originally wanted to go up and greet them and get some food, but I saw that those people were too fierce, so I didn't dare to go up. The man grinned and said, there are about 6 or 7 people in this group, and there's even a woman. Don't judge the woman by her clothes. She's definitely beautiful. If it weren't for the fact that they're so fierce, I would have gone up to greet them. Get to the point. Jing Yu's face turned cold when she heard the man's nonsense, and she glared at him and shouted, Cough, cough. Don't be in such a hurry. The man pursed his lips slightly and then said, I saw this group of people 2 days ago in the afternoon. They seemed to have provoked the Black Qilin and were fleeing in all directions. These people still have some brains. Even if they were being chased, they didn't flee in all directions. Instead, they stayed together. And I don't know where they got the powder to repel the Black Qilin, but they ran away. Those men were really good, and I couldn't even save the damsel in distress. The man pointed to the south and said, Then they ran in that direction? What did you just say? There was only one woman in that group? Jing Yu didn't hear anything wrong, but Shangguan Linglan did. His face was slightly pale as he stared at the man and asked. Yes, there was only one. The man heard Shangguan Linglan's question, thought carefully, and nodded firmly. Are you sure it was a woman? Not a woman? Shangguan Linglan's body seemed to tremble, and he clenched his fists tightly as he stared at the man and asked, Girl, are you kidding me? The man waved his hand unhappily and said, This young master's eyes are the best at reading people. That girl's age is about the same as yours. How could I be wrong? Jing Yu understood the crux of the problem. Logically speaking, if General Shangguan's family was exiled here, then Shangguan Linglan's mother should be here as well. Moreover, Xiao Chen's message said that Shanghai Linglan's mother was here. But now, this man said that Shangguan Linglan definitely didn't give up on his wife. Logically speaking, he should have seen 2 women, a girl and a woman. But now, he was saying that Shangguan Linglan's mother wasn't in the group at all. Linglan, don't worry. Jing Yu quickly grabbed Shangguan Linglan's hand and said, No, you must have seen wrongly. Shangguan Linglan's eyes were filled with agitation and anger as he glared fiercely at the man in front of him and shouted. The man realized that something was wrong and looked at Shangguan Linglan in shock. He frowned and said, Girl, maybe. Yes, I was wrong. The man wanted to say something, but Jing Yu glanced at him coldly. He was so shocked that he immediately changed his words. Let's go. Jing Yu grabbed Shangguan Linglan's arm and said, You'll know what's going on when you see your father and brothers. Don't think too much. Chapter 876. I say, the 2 of you. The man leaning against the wall frowned slightly as he looked at Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan. It's too late for you to find them now. I think they've provoked an incredible number of Black Qilins. Can't you see that all the Black Qilins in this area have disappeared? Otherwise, why would you be wandering around at night without encountering a single Black Qilin? Do you think the Black Soil area is really so safe? The man leaned lazily against the wall as he spoke. A faint smile appeared on his face. If we really want to find them, we'll have to go to that place. Jing Yu frowned when she heard that. She looked at the man who closed his eyes as though he was about to fall asleep. Let's go. Xiang Tian's expression changed slightly as he turned and walked in the direction the man pointed. Xiang Tian, you're going to that place too? Just as Jing Yu and the rest turned to leave, the man behind them suddenly spoke. The sharpness in his voice caused Jing Yu and Shangguan Lingli to stop in their tracks. However, Xiang Tian didn't stop at all. I'll naturally do what I promised. Xiang Tian replied indifferently. He didn't stop walking and didn't even turn his head. Fuck. You're still so stubborn. Go, go. I'll watch you go to your death. The man seemed to be quite angry. Jingyu turned to look at the man who was stomping his feet. She turned to look at Xiang Tian in confusion. In the end, he silently followed behind Xiang Tian and quickly walked a few steps to stand beside Xiang Tian. Actually, you've helped us enough. We'll walk on our own from now on, Jingyu said indifferently as she looked ahead. No need. If I die, it's my fate. When Xiang Tian said this, he didn't even blink his eyes. He just calmly looked ahead and replied, Xiang Tian, do you know who I am? Seeing how Xiang Tian didn't seem to care about his own life, Jingyu suddenly felt a little angry. Xiang Xing worshipped him so much and was still so young. How could he be so indifferent to his own life? Jingyu shot forward and stood in front of Xiang Tian. She stared at him and asked, I don't care. Xiang Tian replied indifferently. Look carefully. Who am I? When Jingyu heard Xiang Tian's reply, she became even angrier. She raised her hand and pulled down the gauze covering her eyes, revealing her dark green eyes. In that instant, there was a slight change in Xiang Tian's expression. So, it's an otherworldly pupil, Xiang Tian said silently. Listening to his words, people inexplicably felt that Xiang Tian's words were more like an answer to the man's words a while ago. So, Jingyu stared at Xiang Tian and said, Do you regret it now? Let's go. It'll be too late if we don't leave now. Xiang Tian quietly retracted his gaze from Jingyu's eyes and walked past her. This was definitely the biggest blow to Jingyu. The first time a stranger saw her eyes and didn't react at all. No, it should be this little reaction. Why? Chapter 877. Hey, you. That's your reaction? Jingyu stared at Xiang Tian with wide eyes as she asked. Xiang Tian glanced at Jingyu silently and continued walking forward. He didn't stop walking as he said, If that's not my reaction, what else do you want me to do? No, Jingyu furrowed her brows and faced Xiang Tian. She walked backwards and said, Look carefully. I have abnormal pupils. Abnormal pupils. Do you know what abnormal pupils are? They're monsters. Is that so? Xiang Tian finally stopped walking after hearing Jingyu's words. He narrowed his eyes and sized up Jingyu before saying, Then tell me, what kind of monster are you? Jingyu was stunned by Xiang Tian's words. Ha ha ha. Jingyu Jiejia, don't go down a dead end. Xiang Xing couldn't hold it in any longer and burst out laughing. Even if you have 8 hands now, Big Brother will still look the same. Ha ha ha. Fuck. This is too much of a blow to me. Jingyu stared at Xiang Tian. This was the first time she felt so hurt. In the past, whenever she showed abnormal pupils, she could scare a bunch of people to death. Okay? But now, Jingyu expressed that she was deeply hurt. Could it be that the reason you showed me your pupils earlier was to scare me? Shangguan Linglan held his forehead speechlessly. He turned to look in front and pursed his lips slightly as he said, The place that person was talking about, is it the forbidden area of the Black Earth Zone? After Shangguan Linglan finished speaking, Jingyu's expression also became serious. That's right. Xiang Tian pursed his lips and said, That place. No one has ever seen anyone come out of it. Even I don't dare to go near it. But since Xiang Xing is here, it might be better. Xiang Tian silently said this and began to walk forward. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan both frowned when they heard this. They looked at Xiang Tian, who was walking in front of them, and frowned slightly. What did Xiang Tian mean by that? Xiang Xing didn't say anything and just followed behind Xiang Tian with a smile on his face. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan exchanged glances, and just as they were about to speak, Jingyu suddenly caught the sound of something breaking through the air. Jingyu's eyes widened slightly, and she suddenly shouted, Careful! Before Jingyu could finish her warning, Xiang Tian, who had been walking quietly, suddenly dodged to the side. A pitch-black arrow stuck close to Xiang Tian's nose and pierced into the ground. But the strange thing was that even with such a huge impact, only half of the arrowhead was inserted into the ground. One could imagine how hard the ground of the Black Earth region was. Xiang Tian, do you dare to fight me? Just as Jingyu was surprised, a cold voice filled with battle intent exploded in everyone's ears. On the path in front of Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan, a figure slowly appeared. The figure that appeared was holding a huge sword in his hand, and his face was filled with ferocity. The clothes on his body couldn't even be called clothes, they were simply strips of cloth. Looking at the person's exposed arm, which was full of scars, it was obvious that this person was another person who liked to fight. Li Weiming. Xiang Tian looked at the person who appeared in front of him and accurately called out his name. A cold look appeared in his eyes as he said indifferently, "You've already been defeated. Why come here to humiliate yourself?" Chapter 878. Xiang Tian. I will definitely defeat you today. After Li Weiming heard Xiang Tian's words, the expression on his face became very vicious. He waved the huge sword in his hand and pointed it at Xiang Tian as he shouted angrily, "I don't have time to play with you today. Get out of my way," Xiang Tian said quietly. "Ha ha ha. Xiang Tian, are you afraid?" When Li Weiming heard Xiang Tian's words, he waved the long sword in his hand angrily and glared at Xiang Tian fiercely. "Let's go." Xiang Tian completely ignored his provocation and turned around to leave. How could Li Weiming give Xiang Tian the chance to do so? He waved the huge sword in his hand and slashed it at Xiang Tian fiercely. Xiang Tian's expression finally changed. He looked coldly at Li Weiming. Then, under the astonished gazes of Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan, Xiang Tian unsheathed the long sword in his hand. His body, dressed in black, suddenly rushed forward like a ghost. Hiss. So fast. Jingyu looked at Xiang Tian's speed and widened her eyes. Of course. Xiang Xing raised his chin proudly and looked at the two people who were exchanging blows in an instant. He said, "My big brother is the fastest person in the black soil zone with his sword. Until now, no one has been able to withstand 30 moves from my big brother. Fast, accurate, ruthless." Jingyu looked at Li Weiming, who was almost completely suppressed in the arena. Although Li Weiming's huge sword was big, its speed was suppressed because it required strength to wield it. He couldn't display his full strength at all. The speed of Xiang Tian's sword made Jingyu gasp in amazement. In Jingyu's knowledge of two lives, Xiang Tian was definitely the fastest person. No one could compare to his speed. Jingyu couldn't distinguish the speed of his sword at all. Whether it was his footsteps or his sword moves, they were all very, very fast. All right. Jingyu's eyes lit up. As soon as Jingyu finished speaking, the two people who were entangled with each other also fell to the ground. Xiang Tian coldly pointed his sword at the battered and exhausted Li Weiming on the ground. And Li Weiming's clothes, Li Weiming lowered his head and looked at the strips of cloth on his body. He laughed loudly and said, "Ha ha ha, I'm smart. I knew you would use this trick again. This time, I'm not even wearing clothes. Let's see how you're going to cut it." Xiang Tian's face darkened. He raised his hand and sheathed his sword. He looked at Li Weiming indifferently and said, "You lost. Move aside." Let me tell you, one day, I will definitely defeat you." Li Weiming jumped up and glared fiercely at Xiang Tian. Hearing this, Xiang Tian's body trembled slightly. He turned to look at Li Weiming and said, "You've challenged me 148 times and lost 148 times. However, you've only broken through after my failures. You've never thought of giving up. There's no enmity between us. Why do you keep chasing me?" Xiang Tian didn't seem to understand. He stared at Li Weiming and asked seriously, I also forgot." When Li Weiming heard Xiang Tian's question, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he thought about it very seriously and found that he had forgotten why he met Xiang Tian in the first place. It was as if this had become the thing he wanted to do the most. Chapter 879. Anyway, I just want to defeat you. Li Weiming's eyes were full of fighting spirit. He stared at Xiang Tian and spat out these words with determination. Okay. Xiang Tian stared at Li Weiming and nodded slowly. His eyes revealed a very happy expression. He looked at Li Weiming and said, If I can come back alive, I will definitely have a good fight with you and make you accept your defeat wholeheartedly. Ha ha ha, bullshit. When I master the frenzied blade, I will definitely chop you up. Li Weiming laughed loudly. Halfway through his laughter, Li Weiming suddenly stopped. He looked at Xiang Tian with some confusion and said, "What did you just say? Where are you going? What do you mean by coming back alive?" Xiang Tian pursed his lips slightly and didn't say anything. However, Li Weiming seemed to know something. His eyes suddenly widened as he looked at Xiang Tian in disbelief and said, "The direction you are going. Are you going to the forbidden area?" "Yes." Xiang Tian nodded slightly and said, "You fucker. You tricked me." Li Weiming's eyes suddenly widened. Then, he instantly jumped up and stared at Xiang Tian and said, "You fucking went to the forbidden area and came back alive. Who are you trying to fool?" Xiang Tian's face darkened slightly. He was cursed to death before he even went in. "Tell me, are you going to the forbidden area to avoid me?" Li Weiming's eyes were full of hostility. He stared fiercely at Xiang Tian and said, "Anyway, I can't beat you for the time being. If you want to go, then kill me if you have the ability." "What kind of logic is that?" Xiang Tian frowned slightly. He stared at Li Weiming in front of him with a conflicted expression and said with a frown, "I'm going to the forbidden area because of a promise. I don't care about your promise. Don't kill me. Don't even think about going to the forbidden area." The man raised his hand and waved the huge sword in his hand. His body blocked in front of Xiang Tian. Everyone was silent when they saw the person blocking their way. They silently looked at Xiang Tian. 5 minutes later, I say, Jingyu swallowed her saliva and looked at Xiang Tian with a conflicted expression. "Are you sure? This is okay?" As Jingyu spoke, she silently shifted her gaze to the wriggling mummy on the ground behind her. Li Weiming, who had been clamoring just a moment ago, had been tied up like a mummy by Xiang Tian expressionlessly. He was lying on the ground with his mouth sealed, wriggling on the ground. That red face and the sound coming out of that mouth. Even though they were so far away, Jingyu seemed to be able to feel that Li Weiming was definitely cursing. "I'm fine. Let's go." Xiang Tian's expression didn't change during the entire process. He just waved his hand and left without leaving a trace. Jingyu silently mourned for Li Weiming and followed Xiang Tian to the legendary forbidden area. After a night of torment, the sky was already bright by the time they reached the forbidden area. In order to let everyone conserve their energy, they rested for an hour on the way. After a nap, they found some things. The sky finally lit up after Jingyu, and the others opened their eyes. Jingyu looked at the gray sky and sighed. Why did she feel that the night in the black soil region was like a dream? She was not used to it. Do you see that? That's the forbidden area of the black soil zone. Xiang Tian stood up and looked at the mountain rocks not far away. Chapter 880. Jingyu followed Xiang Tian's gaze and saw the mountain rocks not far away. The tall rocks seemed to have formed a thick wall, separating the forest on one side and the forest on the other. The scenery in front of them was like a canyon. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan looked at the place. There were very few trees in this area. In the daytime, Jingyu could clearly see the black soil area in front of them. "Let's go, it's daybreak," Xiang Tian said, and led the way towards the forbidden area of the black soil area. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan looked at each other and followed Xiang Tian's footsteps. The closer they got to the legendary forbidden area, the stranger Jingyu felt. She was looking forward to what was hidden in the forbidden area of the black soil area. It was so scary. "Stop!" Just as Jingyu was using her brain to imagine what she would encounter after entering, a loud shout suddenly sounded. Jingyu and the others were startled and turned around to look. Their faces instantly darkened. "Xiang Tian, I'm telling you, don't think of shaking me off." The person standing in front of them was Li Weiming, who was tied up last night. Jingyu stared dumbfoundedly at Li Weiming, who was riddled with scars. She was suddenly at a loss for words. This person must have rubbed his body against the tree trunk with all his might. Was that why he broke the rope and chased after them? Xiang Tian silently stared at Li Weiming. Since we're already here, if you want to go in, I'll go in with you. Li Weiming glanced at the mountain rocks behind him and said nonchalantly to Xiang Tian, Li Weiming. This was the first time Xiang Tian called Li Weiming's name in such a complicated manner. He stared at Li Weiming for a long time and suddenly sighed deeply. The helplessness on his face was clear. You. Let me tell you. Don't think I can't beat you now. You can tie me up again. When Li Weiming heard Xiang Tian call his name, he immediately retreated in shock. He looked at Li Weiming with a vigilant expression and shouted. Xiang Tian's face darkened. Jingyu almost laughed out loud as she watched from the side. This person was suffering from the aftereffects of being tied up. Just as Jingyu and the others were talking at the entrance of the forbidden area, the originally bright sky suddenly changed. The sun that had just been hung up actually showed signs of being incomplete, and a strong wind blew in all directions. That's Shangguan Linglan, Xiang Tianyi, and the others all saw the strange changes in front of them. Solar eclipse? Jingyu was dumbfounded as she looked at the sun that was gradually being blocked out. The appearance of the incomplete sun caused the originally bright sky to change, and the quiet forest also became restless. What's going on? Li Weiming was also dumbfounded. He didn't see the situation in front of him at all. Why did the sky turn dark? Shangguan Linglan looked at the situation in front of him with a blank and confused expression. It's a solar eclipse. The heavenly dog eats the sun. It came true. It came true. Just when everyone was silent, Xiang Xing suddenly jumped up in excitement. He reached out and grabbed Xiang Tian's arm, jumping up and down as he shouted, You know about the solar eclipse? Jingyu suddenly turned to look at Xiang Xing with a questioning look in her eyes. Chapter 881. 5 years ago, Xiang Xing swallowed his saliva and said, Someone said that when the sun was eaten, it would be the time when the Black Earth region and Luan City were reborn. Look, the sun was really eaten. Big brother, big sister Fei, is coming back. When Xiang Xing's words fell, Xiang Tian's eyes also changed, the color of his eyes fluctuating greatly. What? Who said that? When Jingyu heard Xiang Xing's words, she frowned in confusion. I don't know, an old man. After saying it, he disappeared. Xiang Xing shook his head slightly, his face full of excitement as he looked at the sky. Just as Jingyu and the others were talking, a quarter of the sun was already blocked out, and the originally quiet forest became restless. Jingyu and the others were standing on higher ground, and with a glance, they could see that there seemed to be countless things in the forest of the Black Earth region being driven in their direction. What is that? Jingyu's eyes flashed slightly, looking at the moving things in the distance. Her eyes suddenly widened. It's the black cheelants. Jingyu and Xiang Xing shouted almost simultaneously. The trees in the forest seemed to be moving, and countless black cheelants appeared out of nowhere and ran wildly in the forest. Jingyu and the others stood on higher ground and could clearly see the people below getting closer and closer to them. Fuck his grandpa. Are these damn things crazy? Quick, quick, quick. Run. Don't block this daddy's way. Quick, quick, quick. The countless people hiding in the forest were completely in a mess. At a glance, Jingyu was completely confused. So there were actually so many people hiding in the forest? Almost all of them were running for their lives in a flurry. The black cheelants behind them chased like crazy, and they were chasing in a carpet style. Jingyu could clearly see that these black cheelants wanted to drive these people towards the forbidden area of the Black Earth region. Those people who saw the forbidden area of the Black Earth region in front of them wanted to run to the side, but in an instant, they were chased back, making them feel so sad that they were about to cry. Did you see that? These ink cheelants are organized. Jingyu was very familiar with wild beasts. How could she not see this scene clearly? She had seen with her own eyes how the black Kirin was encircled and suppressed. If there had been no command, how could it have ended up like this? Jingyu stared at the situation below for a long time. Just as she was about to withdraw her gaze, she suddenly saw an extremely familiar figure. Fuck, isn't that Xiaoqin? Jingyu's eyes widened as she looked at the figure that had rushed out of the forest in an instant. nimbly avoiding all obstacles and leaping at the front. That familiar figure made Jing Yu's eyes widen. Xing Er is here too, Jing Yu said quietly. She suddenly felt nervous. She had entered the black soil zone without even discussing it with Xiao Qian. Now that she had been caught, Jing Yu trembled violently. It's over. Jing Yu was still thinking about whether she should run in first. However, just as Jing Yu had this thought, Xiao Qian below seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Jing Yu. It was just one glance. Immediately, Jing Yu gave up all thoughts of running away. If she ran away, she would definitely die miserably. 1/3 of the sun in the sky had been blocked, and the sky was turning dark little by little. Xiao Qian's pitch-black eyes stared at Jing Yu. He originally maintained the same speed, but suddenly increased his speed and instantly shook off the people behind him. Chapter 882. What the fuck? Who is that? He doesn't look like Xiang Tian. Could he be a newcomer? This speed is almost catching up to Xiang Tian. It's over. It's getting harder and harder to survive in the black soil region. When Xiao Qian started to speed up, the people behind him couldn't remain calm. They all stared at Xiao Qian with wide eyes. Jing Yu saw the rapidly approaching Xiao Qian. She swallowed her saliva silently and took a few steps forward to welcome him. There was no need to say anything. She had to please this man first. Xiao Qian. Jing Yu threw herself at Xiao Qian without saying anything. Her posture was handsome, her expression was sincere, and her voice was filled with love. When Xiao Qian saw Jing Yu throwing herself at him, his expression softened slightly. He opened his arms and caught Jing Yu, who was throwing herself at him. He spun his body and stood firmly on the spot. The hand that was hugging Jing Yu tightened slightly. Xiao Qian. Jing Yu decided to gain the initiative by saying that she was afraid of something. One had to know that this delicate woman could make a man pity her. However, just as Jing Yu was about to open her mouth, Xiao Qian kissed her without saying anything. Oh! Jing Yu widened her eyes. She was completely unprepared. Shangguan Linglan looked at this scene and silently covered his eyes. The 9th emperors were indeed the 9th emperors. They were so domineering and classy. There were hundreds of people behind them looking at them, and they actually kissed. After a deep kiss, Jing Yu was almost out of breath. Only then did Xiao Qian slowly release his hand. Xiao Qian. Jing Yu raised her head and looked at Xiao Qian with an aggrieved expression. Xiao Qian looked at Jing Yu silently and calmly said, "Punishment? I know I was wrong." Jing Yu lowered her head with a red face and carefully looked at Jing Yu. "I knew you wouldn't be able to resist coming to the black soil region." Xiao Qian took a deep breath and raised his hand to caress Jing Yu's cheek. He said, "I don't want to restrict you, but don't make me so worried. Do you know that I've been looking for you like crazy?" Xiao Qian stared at Jing Yu with a burning gaze and said slowly. Jing Yu's eyes widened slightly as she looked at the man who was staring at her deeply. Suddenly, she was lost in thought for a moment. At this moment, Jing Yu actually felt as if she had become his entire world at some point in time. In just a day, he had been so anxious. Xiao Qian. Jing Yu hugged Xiao Qian's waist and buried her head in his chest. She closed her eyes. Xiao Qian also hugged Jing Yu tightly. He sighed in satisfaction and lowered his eyes. Everyone behind them stood on the hillside. At the bottom of the hillside, countless black cheelants surrounded them. They didn't chase them up, but they didn't leave either. They just surrounded them. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. They didn't know what was going on. When Jing Yu and Xiao Qian separated, Xing Er stepped forward. "Master, madam." Xing Er's gaze first landed on Shangguan Linglan. Then, he calmly turned his gaze back and bowed slightly to Xiao Qian and Jing Yu. "When did you come in?" Jing Yu looked up at Xiao Qian and Xing Er and asked. "Last night at nightfall," Xiao Qian calmly replied. "Someone said that they saw you come in, so I chased after you. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any trace of you after a night of searching." Chapter 883. If that's the case, I have to thank these enchanting. If it weren't for them, we would have been able to see them for a longer time after entering the forbidden area. Jingyu said as her eyes turned slightly and landed on the ink cheilants at the bottom of the hill behind her. You still dare to say that? When Xiao Chun heard Jingyu's words, his face suddenly froze. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Jingyu as he said, What's going on? Don't you know where this is? The forbidden area of the Black Soil region. How can you enter it just because you want to? This? Jingyu looked at Xiao Qin's gloomy face and immediately lowered her head guiltily. She scolded herself fiercely in her heart. Of all things to say, why did you have to talk about this topic? When Xiao Chun and Jingyu were talking, the sun above their heads was already half covered and the sky gradually darkened. Everyone looked up at the sky and saw the sun that was originally hanging high in the sky being swallowed up so easily. What the hell is going on? Everyone who lived in the Black Soil region looked at the sky angrily and cursed. Xiang Tian. A voice sounded. Jingyu looked sideways and saw a man running to Xiang Tian's side. This man was none other than the man that Jingyu saw a few days ago, the man who gave Jingyu and the others the news. Zhanqi, why are you here? Xiang Tian asked with a frown when he saw the man running over. I didn't want to come. Don't you see what's going on? Zhanqi said as he pointed at the densely packed ink cheilants below and said, This thing went crazy and chased us all out. I can't run even if I want to. Zhanqi was this man's name. He had a shrewd appearance and was familiar with Xiang Tian. The two of them gathered together to talk. Jingyu pulled Xiao Chun and walked towards Xiang Tian and the others. This is my husband, Xiao Chun. Jingyu held Xiao Chen's hand and said to everyone, Xiao Chun. After hearing this name, Xiang Tian's expression changed slightly. He narrowed his eyes at Xiao Chun and said, I've heard of the Ninth Emperor's name for a long time. It's a pleasure to finally meet you today. You flatter me. Xiao Chun responded indifferently and said, In the Black Soil region, young Master Xiang's name. When the two of them looked at each other, Jingyu, who was standing beside them, felt that sparks were about to fly. The two of them looked at each other for a long time before they slowly separated. The sky was getting darker and darker. Someone had already lit the torch. After a few more minutes, the sky was completely dark. Above their heads, the originally dazzling sun had completely turned into a circle of light. Everyone stood on the hillside and pointed, holding torches in their hands to illuminate this only place. At this moment, the ink cheilin, who had been standing on the hillside, suddenly became restless. It seemed to be very excited and made some strange noises. Everyone looked at the ink cheilin below and became nervous. Did you notice? These ink cheilants seem to want to chase us all into the forbidden area. Jingyu's expression changed slightly. She turned to look at Xiang Tian with a serious expression and asked, Have you encountered this situation before? Chapter 884. No. Xiang Tian shook his head slowly and said, This is the first time I've encountered one. That's strange. Jingyu heard Xiang Tian's reply and frowned. She said, Why did these black cheilants chase us into this forbidden area? What exactly is in this forbidden area, yeah? Since everyone in the Black Soil Zone has been chased out and my parents aren't among them, they must have entered the forbidden area. Shangguan Linglan turned and looked at Jingyu with a determined gaze and said, I want to go in. Jingyu nodded deeply. Just as Jingyu and the rest decided to go in, there was a sudden exclamation from the crowd. It's moving! It's moving! The black cheilin is coming! There was a commotion in the crowd. Everyone's eyes were filled with excitement as they shouted loudly. Everyone retreated step by step as the black cheilin in front of them approached step by step. Let's go! Jingyu looked at the scene in front of her, and her expression changed slightly. She frowned and turned to Xiang Tian and said, Let's go, let's go. These little bastards seem to want to force us into the forbidden area so that we can break through and escape. There's no way we can do that. We might as well go in and see if there's a way out of this forbidden area. Someone shouted loudly and the rest echoed, That's right. These little bastards want to force us to our deaths. We're going to die either way. Why don't we see what's in this legendary forbidden area? Yes, yes, yes. Let's go. Fuck. I don't even know how many times I've escaped death. Why would I care about this little bit of death? Let's go. Let's fucking go in and take a look. Let's have some fun. Ha ha ha. That's right. Let's go together. One person's call resonated with the rest of the crowd. Jingyu stared dumbfounded at the group of people who rushed forward without any scruples. The corners of her mouth twitched. They had ambition and courage, but those without brains were still fools. Stop. Jingyu looked at the people who were charging forward and suddenly shouted, there might be something even more terrifying inside. If you go in rashly, you'll only be throwing your lives away. It's best to be careful. Who are you? I didn't see any of you in the black soil region. One of the burly men strode out and sized up Jingyu's group before asking in confusion, is it really that important to think about this now? Jingyu turned her head and replied indifferently, Li Chong, what she said makes sense. Just as the burly man was about to speak, Xiang Tian, who was standing behind Jingyu, slowly stepped forward and stood in front of the burly man. He called out his name with great precision. Xiang Tian, why are you here? The brawny man named Li Chong recognized Xiang Tian at a glance, and a look of pleasant surprise flashed across his eyes. When Li Chong's voice fell, everyone immediately looked over. Who in the black soil region didn't know Xiang Tian's name? Since everyone is here, I'm naturally here too, Xiang Tian replied indifferently. Xiang Tian responded indifferently. He raised his hand and looked at the crowd. What the young lady said just now is not without reason. It is best to be careful. You only have one life. If you lose it, you will never be able to get it back. As Xiang Tian spoke, he turned his head slightly and looked at the entrance of the forbidden area with a frown. Chapter 885. Since Big Brother Xiang said so, we naturally won't act recklessly. When the person named Li Chong heard Xiang Tian's words, he turned to look at the crowd behind him and shouted, let's follow Big Brother Xiang. Okay. When the crowd heard Xiang Tian's name, they immediately relaxed. It seemed that at this moment, Xiang Tian had become the backbone of these people. Jingyu was a little surprised by the situation in front of her. She didn't expect Xiang Tian's reputation in the black soil zone to be so resounding that he could actually make everyone yield. Li Weiming looked at these people and said disdainfully, almost everyone in the black soil zone was defeated by Xiang Tian. Otherwise, how did Xiang Tian's reputation come about? When Li Weiming's words fell, Jingyu widened her eyes and turned to look at Xiang Tian with a puzzled face. Finally, her gaze fell on Zhan Qi. Don't look at me like that. As soon as Zhan Qi received Jingyu's gaze, he immediately waved his hand and said, when I see Xiang Tian, I run for my life. Don't talk about fighting. You misunderstood. I just want to ask you if you were also defeated by Xiang Tian. Jingyu looked at Zhan Qi with interest and said, how is it possible? Zhan Qi laughed twice and said calmly, when Xiang Tian didn't draw his sword, I was already begging for mercy. Zhan Qi said it as if it was a matter of course. Useless. Li Weiming scolded quite disdainfully. Yes. You, Li Weiming, are promising, but aren't you defeated by Xiang Tian? It is said that you were defeated 148 times? Oh, no. I heard that you were defeated again last night. That is 149 times. TSK. Zhan Qi. Li Weiming's face turned pale when he heard Zhan Qi's words. He glared at Zhan Qi angrily and said, I just can't beat Xiang Tian for the time being, but it's more than enough to beat you. As Li Weiming spoke, he suddenly brandished the huge sword strapped to his back. Without saying a word, he slashed towards Zhan Qi. When Zhan Qi saw that Li Weiming had attacked without saying a word, his face suddenly changed, and he retreated continuously. You lunatic? Ha ha ha. Zhan Qi is such an idiot. Of all the people he could provoke, he had to provoke Li Weiming, this lunatic. The commotion attracted everyone's attention. Everyone looked at the two people fighting, and they all crossed their arms to watch the show. Fuck. Do you have to go so far? Don't think that I won't fight back. Under Li Weiming's attack, Zhan Qi had no power to fight back and could only dodge. Li Weiming, stop it for me right now. Fuck your grandpa. No more fighting. I'm not fighting anymore. Don't you understand human language? I'm not fighting anymore. This time, Zhanqi really wanted to cry but had no tears. No matter what he said, this Li Weiming just wouldn't let him go. I was wrong. Big brother Li. Big brother. I was wrong. I'm not fighting anymore. You're amazing. You're the best. Zhanqi really wanted to cry. How could he be Li Weiming's opponent? After this beating, he really didn't have the strength to run anymore. He looked like he was about to cry as he begged for mercy in a gorgeous way. Jingyu looked at the two people in shock. The corner of her mouth twitched fiercely. This black soil area really had the most weirdos. Li Weiming, that's enough. At this time, Xiang Tian also said, everyone, get ready. We're going to the forbidden area. Humph. You're lucky, you little skinny chicken. Li Weiming put away the huge sword in his hand, threw a disdainful sentence, and turned to leave. Chapter 886. Yes, yes, yes. I'm little skinny chicken. Zhanqi watched Li Weiming leave and nodded in agreement. Zhanqi's good-for-nothing look made Li Weiming so angry that he glared at him. He seemed to feel that it was quite inappropriate for him to fight with such a person. At the entrance of the Black Earth Zone's forbidden area, Jingyu, Xiao Qian, and the others followed the crowd's footsteps and stepped in bit by bit. The sky was still pitch black. Everyone held torches in their hands to illuminate the road ahead. The scene inside seemed to be no different from the outside. After walking for a while, they saw a thin fog in front of them. Everyone clenched the weapons in their hands and stared ahead with rapt attention. Look behind you. At this moment, a voice sounded in the crowd. Everyone turned their heads and saw the situation in front of them at a glance. The entrance that they came from was blocked by a dense group of black Kirans. The black Kirans stepped on each other's backs and blocked the intersection layer by layer. They made a sound similar to a bird's cry, which made Jingyu frown slightly. For some reason, Jingyu felt that this sound was very strange. Xiao Chun, do you know why they are like this? Jingyu looked up at Xiao Chun and asked. Xiao Chun was silent for a moment. He shook his head with a solemn expression and said, after we go in, maybe we'll know. The Ninth Emperors. Just as Jingyu and Xiao Chun were talking, Xiang Tian, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped. He looked at Xiao Qian with a burning gaze and said, back then, the Ninth Emperors passed through the Black Earth Zone alone and walked out of this forbidden area. I'm afraid that no one here is more familiar with this place than you. As soon as Xiang Tian's words fell, everyone's gaze immediately turned to Xiao Qian and Jingyu's group. The way they looked at Xiao Qian changed. In this small area of the Black Earth Zone, any news could spread extremely quickly. What they heard the most these days was nothing more than the Ninth Emperors and the Empress with different pupils. If no one mentioned the Ninth Emperors, and no one thought about who the Ninth Emperors were, then the old matters of the past would be dug up. How did the Ninth Emperors and Xiao Qian become famous in one city back then? The most important thing was that some people saw Xiao Qian walk out of the forbidden area of the Black Earth Zone alone and scathed. They saw him pass through the Black Earth Zone and arrive at one city. Such a terrifying matter naturally became the focus of everyone's discussion. Many people thought that the forbidden area of the Black Soil Zone was safe. A few people mustered up their courage and went in, but they never came out. No matter how many people went in, no matter how many cattle or sheep went in, none of them came out. The forbidden area of the Black Earth Zone was still a forbidden area, but someone could come out unscathed. Why was this? As the matter of the past was gradually dug up, Xiao Qian's reputation once again resounded in Luan City. This time, Jingyu, the Empress with different pupils, became famous along with him. As soon as Xiang Tian's words fell, everyone's gaze towards Jingyu and Xiao Qian's group changed. We should go. Xiao Qian looked around with an indifferent expression. Under the covetous gazes of so many people, he didn't say a word. Chapter 887. Xiao Qian held Jingyu's hand and walked forward. Jingyu glanced at Xiao Qian and frowned. When she passed by the crowd, Jingyu lowered her eyes. When she opened them again, her dark eyes had turned green. She raised her hand to touch Zhang Hua's body that was wrapped around her waist. She looked at everyone with a warning look in her cold eyes. That pair of dark green eyes caused everyone's eyes to widen slightly. Seeing a person's eyes turn into a different color in front of their own eyes, everyone was quite surprised. Xiao Chun. Jingyu stuck close to Xiao Chun and looked up at Xiao Chun. You really walked out of here? Yes. Xiao Chun hugged Jingyu's waist and frowned. He hugged Jingyu tightly and said, no matter what happens later, don't let go of my hand. Okay. Jingyu interlocked her fingers with Xiao Chun's. She leaned against Xiao Chun and walked forward step by step. The people behind him also followed. The dark sky finally began to recover after everyone walked through the canyon. The sun that was swallowed was also revealed little by little. When everyone stood outside the canyon, the dark sky had also completely recovered. Is this the forbidden area of the Black Earth region? Jingyu stood beside Xiao Qian and looked at the forest that looked exactly the same as the one in the Black Earth region. Her eyes were filled with confusion, but it didn't seem to be any different. Everyone looked at the forest in front of them in confusion. It seemed that they couldn't see anything different in this forest. What is this? Just as everyone was looking at the forest, someone suddenly asked. This voice attracted everyone's attention. Jingyu took a few steps forward and saw the thing in front of her clearly. It was a bone buried deep in the Black Earth region. Jingyu didn't even need to look at it to know that it was a human bone. SSS. It seems like this place isn't simple. Everyone looked at the bone and their faces turned serious. They swallowed their saliva and walked forward carefully. The trees, soil, and even the sky in the forest were the same as outside. However, it was this similarity that made Jingyu feel strange. Linglan, don't you feel that this place is familiar? Jingyu looked at Shangguan Linglan curiously. They had already walked for a while, and these people in the Black Earth region were probably used to going out alone. Almost everyone was scattered, each looking in one direction. Their bodies were tense as they observed the situation around them. This place. Have we been here before? Shangguan Linglan also realized that something was wrong. This place was so familiar. Wasn't it the place they went to last night? Sure. Listen, there's a sound. Just as Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan were thinking, Zhanqi suddenly made a shushing gesture. Everyone's hearts trembled slightly as they listened attentively. Jingyu's expression changed slightly. Her green eyes flickered slightly as she narrowed her eyes and looked around. In the dense forest, there seemed to be a dark figure flashing by. Jingyu's eyes suddenly widened as if she had a natural instinct. Chapter 888. It's a beast. Jingyu shouted coldly. Just as Jingyu shouted, a clear howl suddenly sounded in the forest. A pitch-black figure suddenly jumped out of the dense forest. The moment they saw this figure, everyone's eyes widened. This beast with pitch-black fur was about the size of a tiger. Looking at the appearance of this beast, everyone couldn't be more familiar with it. Fuck. An enlarged version of the ink Qilin? Jingyu stared dumbfoundedly at the ink Qilin in front of her, which had suddenly become bigger. She couldn't recover for a long time. Everyone was also stunned by the sudden situation in front of them. They all stared with wide eyes at the roaring ink Qilin in front of them. Let's go. Xiao Chen suddenly shouted. It's summoning more ink Qilins. You know? Jingyu stared at Xiao Chen in shock and asked, don't you know? Xiao Chen frowned and looked at Jingyu, seemingly puzzled. He then looked at everyone else. Do you think everyone is like you? Have you been here before? Jingyu was almost angered to death by Xiao Chen. Looking at Xiao Chen's expression, Jingyu knew that Xiao Chen must have thought that these people who lived in the Black Soil region must know the situation inside. Xiao Chen's face darkened slightly. Stop talking. Let's run. Jingyu didn't have time to ridicule Xiao Chen, this idiot. She just ran forward. There was no way out even if they ran back. The entrance was blocked by the pocket-sized ink Qilins, and in front of them was a giant ink Qilin blocking the way. Jingyu was about to cry. What was the matter with these ink Qilins? Could it be that they were born outside and then came here to grow up? Not long after they stepped into the forbidden area, everyone began to run as if their lives depended on it. Behind them, there was a black Qilin chasing after them. Later on, there were 10 of them, dozens of them, and more. The sound of running made Jingyu's stomach cramp. Xiao Chen. This idiot. If Xiao Chen had told Jingyu earlier that there would be ink Qilins here, they wouldn't have stepped in so rashly. No matter what, they would have explored the path and then studied how to proceed. Now, they were just foolishly running forward. They ran right into the ink cheilants just like that. This way. Xiao Chun held Jing Yu's hand tightly and ran to the side. Everyone followed Xiao Chun and ran. Xiao Chun heard the sound of water in front of them and quickened his footsteps. They are afraid of water. Jump in. There was a small river in front of them. Xiao Chun raised his voice and shouted. He held Jing Yu tightly and jumped in. The river wasn't very deep, but it wasn't very shallow either. Everyone heard Xiao Chun's words and jumped in one by one. They swam to the middle of the river and saw that the ink cheilants that were chasing after them all stopped by the river and didn't dare to move forward. That was close. Everyone wiped the cold sweat off their faces and looked at the ferocious ink cheilants. They swallowed their saliva and said, "Swim to the other side." Xiao Chun held Jing Yu's hand and swam to the other side of the river. He panted slightly and looked at the people coming up one after another. These people had survived in the black soil area and had seen all kinds of unexpected situations. Chapter 889. This kind of situation wasn't enough to make them panic. Everyone reacted much faster than normal people. Almost as soon as Xiao Chun gave the order, they all followed it. Looking at the people who came up one after another, no one was injured and no one died. Jing Yu was very satisfied with this situation. If these people were used well, they would definitely be of great help. Let's rest for a while. Xiang Tian frowned slightly and said, "Ninth Emperors, do you know what is in this forbidden area? You need to tell us." Heh. Xiao Chun laughed coldly, and his gaze fell on Xiang Tian. After a while, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly and his gaze fell on Xiang Xing. He said indifferently, "You should tell that to him." After saying this, Xiao Chun coldly turned around and walked to the side with Jing Yu. Everyone looked at the situation in front of them in confusion. They didn't understand why the topic of conversation would suddenly change to Xiang Xing. Do you really think that no one can enter the forbidden area of the Black Earth Zone? Xiao Chun sat coldly on a rock and looked at the crowd. His face was calm and emotionless. "Ninth Emperors, what do you mean by this?" Everyone frowned and stared at Xiao Chun as they asked. "Nothing." Xiao Chun indifferently lowered his head and held Jing Yu's hand tightly. Then he turned to look at Xiang Xing and everyone else. He said indifferently, "You should ask him what he wants." "What do you mean?" Everyone looked at Xiang Tian and Xiang Xing. "Xiang Xing?" Xiang Tian was also puzzled. He frowned slightly and called out to Xiang Xing, "Me? I don't know." Xiang Xing blinked his eyes and took a step back. "Is that so? You don't know?" Xiao Chun coldly looked at Xiang Xing and said, "If you don't know, then tell this king what you are holding in your hand." I don't have anything in my hand." Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Xiang Xing reflexively hid his hand behind his back and swallowed his saliva before replying, "Setting up a trap to lure this king and this king's imperial concubine into the black soil, spreading the powder so that all the black cheilants in the black soil would drive everyone into the forbidden area. Wasn't all of this planned by you?" Xiao Chen's calm voice sounded as though he was talking about an extremely ordinary matter as he looked at Xiang Xing. Xiang Xing's eyes widened when he heard that. He stared at Xiao Chun in disbelief. Other than the sudden appearance of the solar eclipse, everything else that happened was planned by you. Xiao Chun slowly stood up. He looked at Xiang Xing with burning eyes and said, You tricked all of us into this forbidden area. What is your goal?" "What? Did he trick us into coming in?" When Xiao Chun finished speaking, everyone couldn't remain calm. They all stared at Xiang Xing and Xiao Chun with wide eyes. "The remaining powder in your hand is the powder that attracted the black cheilants, right?" Xiao Chun looked at Xiang Xing coldly with his pitch-black eyes and said, "Now that the powder is useless, you want to throw it away?" "You." Xiang Xing gulped and looked at Xiao Chun with some fear. "Xiang Xing." Xiang Tian's eyes were dark as he coldly glared at Xiang Xing. Chapter 890. Big Brother. Xiang Xing's face turned even paler after being yelled at by Xiang Tian. He lowered his head slightly, and his eyes were filled with sadness. He looked up at Xiang Tian and said, "Big brother, I just want to find big sister Fei, bastard." Xiang Tian's expression changed drastically when he heard this. "Big brother, big sister Fei is still alive. We just have to come and find her. We just have to come and find her." Xiang Xing looked at Xiang Tian excitedly. His eyes were filled with desire as he said, "If we can't find her, then we'll ask everyone for help. I just want everyone to help." "You're sending everyone to their deaths." Xiang Tian must have been furious. How could such a cold person be so angry? He raised his hand and slapped Xiang Xing hard across the face. Jingyu finally understood what Xiang Xing was trying to do. He wanted everyone to rush into the forbidden area to look for one person, and that person was the big sister Fei he was talking about. Obviously, this person had entered the forbidden area before and never came out again. Silence. A deathly silence. No one expected that they were forced into the forbidden area because of someone else's plan. Jingyu looked up at Xiaochen. She was a little confused. How did Xiaochen know about this? Now is not the time to throw a tantrum. Jingyu took a deep breath and looked at everyone. Xiang Xing is also anxious to find her. Even if you kill Xiang Xing now, will you be able to leave the forbidden area? Everything is unknown. The most important thing now is to think about how to get out and where is the exit. After Jingyu finished speaking, everyone lowered their heads. Some angry people raised their swords and slashed at the road. They cursed a few times but couldn't do anything. Just as everyone was silent, another sound came from the quiet forest. This was because of what had happened before. When everyone heard this sound, they all tensed up and felt a wave of fear. No way. They had just escaped from the Black Cheelan's pursuit. Was it coming again? Everyone's eyes were fixed on the bush in front of them, ready to turn around and jump into the river at any time. We've finally seen living people. Just as everyone's faces were tense, a few people suddenly emerged from the dense forest. They were dressed in tattered clothes and looked at Jingyu's group with relaxed expressions. "You are?" Jingyu stared dumbfoundedly at these savage-looking people who suddenly appeared in front of her. Her eyes widened slightly. "You? Big brother? Father?" Just when Jingyu, Xiao Qian, and the others were shocked, Shangguan Linglan was stunned on the spot when those people walked out. Then, her eyes widened slightly as she shouted with a face full of surprise and joy. "Linglan?" An even more surprised voice sounded. Only then did Jingyu see clearly who the people in front of her were. Weren't they General Shangguan's family? Miaoqiu. Jingyu immediately saw Lu Miaoqiu, who was protected at the back. Her black clothes were full of mud, and her delicate face was also covered in dirt. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan hurriedly went forward and hugged her. "Father, I've finally found you." Shangguan Linglan threw herself into Shangguan Hongwen's arms. She couldn't hold back the tears that she had been holding back along the way. In an instant, she burst out crying in Shangguan Hongwen's arms. Chapter 891. It's okay. It's okay. Shangguan Hongwen hugged Shangguan Linglan tightly and sighed deeply. He thought that he wouldn't be able to see his daughter again, but he didn't expect to see her at this moment. Shangguan Linglan appeared in front of him. "Little sister, don't cry. There are so many people here to see you make a fool of yourself." Jingyu recognized a few of the men beside Shangguan Linglan. They were all Shangguan Linglan's brothers. Seeing Shangguan Linglan crying in Shangguan Hongwen's arms, they all felt very uncomfortable. "Miaoqiu, are you okay?" Jingyu held Lu Miaoqiu's hand in surprise and asked Lu Miaoqiu. Yeah, I'm fine." Lu Miaoqiu silently wiped the tears on her face. She saw Xiao Chun standing behind Jingyu and smiled politely at Xiao Chun. Then, she looked at Jingyu and asked, "Why are you here? What else could it be?" "Of course, we're here to find you." Jingyu held Lu Miaoqiu's hand tightly and said, "Do you know how worried I was about you? Linglan and I have been looking for you all this time. We chased after you all the way here. Fortunately, we found you." Yeah. Lu Miaoqiu's eyes turned red when she heard this. She held Jingyu's hand tightly and said, "We originally planned to escape, but we can't get out of Luan City. Someone told us that we can get out of the black soil area, so we came here." Lu Miaoqiu held Jing Yu's hand tightly and said, "But we've been here for 3 days. Other than running for our lives, we don't have any other thoughts. The things here are too scary. We can't find the way out at all. We can't even find the way in." "Don't be afraid." Jing Yu held Lu Miaoqiu's hand tightly and turned to look at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun also frowned. When Shangguan Linglan finally calmed down, everyone sat down. They knew that these people weren't enemies. Everyone sat down and listened to Shangguan Hongwen's explanation of how they came in. Everything before was almost the same as what Lu Miaoqiu said. Shangguan Hongwen wanted to escape from here. They all knew that now that Black Stream was here, they could either wait for death or fight their way out to find Jingyu and Xiao Chun. Since Xiao Yi had already gone to this extent, Shangguan Hongwen and Xiao Ye's last bit of friendship was gone. What was the point of having any more concerns? Furthermore, Shangguan Linglan was by Jing Yu's side and was being hunted down. Shangguan Hongwen was unable to bear it any longer. Thus, he brought his sons and rushed into the Black Soil region. They entered the forbidden area and tried to find a way out. "We've been in this forbidden area for 3 days. Other than running and hiding, we don't have any energy to think about anything else. We've wandered round and round, but we still haven't found a way out." Shangguan Hongwen took a big gulp of water and said slowly, "Father, then, what about my mother?" Shangguan Linglan asked Shangguan Hongwen with some fear after listening to everyone talk for so long. He looked at Shangguan Hongwen with eyes full of fear, as if he was afraid that he would hear bad news from Shangguan Hongwen. Chapter 892. Lan Lan, don't worry, your mother is fine. Shangguan Hongwen patted Shangguan Linglan's head and said, "Before we entered Luan City, your grandfather already took your mother away. Your mother is now under your grandfather's protection. Even if Xiao Yi finds out that I've switched people, he won't make things difficult for your mother." Shangguan Hongwen smiled and said, "Your mother can't take it anymore? Mother is fine." When Shangguan Linglan heard Shangguan Hongwen's words, she finally let go of the breath she had been holding. She took a deep breath and smiled. "Thank you for your hard work, General Shangguan." Jingyu bowed deeply to Shangguan Hongwen. "Ninth Imperial Concubine, you're too polite." Shangguan Hongwen waved his hand and looked at Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan. He seemed to sigh and said, "If I didn't meet you, Ninth Imperial Concubine, my daughter wouldn't have grown up to be so outstanding." Shangguan Hongwen's words made Jingyu a little surprised. Could it be that Shangguan Hongwen didn't blame her at all for causing Shangguan Linglan to become like this? He had been with her when they were hunted down and escaped together. He had even caused the destruction of General Shangguan's estate. "You don't understand what it means to be a general." Shangguan Hongwen took a deep breath and patted Shangguan Linglan's shoulder and said, "Lan Lan chose to be your general. I'm very happy with her growth." At this moment, Jingyu seemed to feel a strong sense of loyalty from Shangguan Hongwen's eyes. She couldn't understand it, but she was also shocked by it. It was a sincerity that couldn't be ignored. "General Shangguan, what did you encounter in the forest?" Xiao Chen pursed his lips and asked Shangguan Hongwen. "Ink cheelants." Shangguan Hongwen took a deep breath and looked at Xiao Chun with a serious expression. He said, "There are ink cheelants everywhere. The ink cheelants here are 10 times the size of the ones outside." "There's nothing else besides the ink cheelants?" Xiao Chen frowned and asked Shangguan Hongwen. "There's nothing else." Shangguan Hongwen frowned and said, "We were chased by the ink cheelants and couldn't move an inch. We could only hide in this area and can't go anywhere else. So we don't know what else is inside." Xiao Chen frowned slightly and nodded in response. "Then what should we do now?" Jingyu's gaze and asked, and Xiao Chen's and the others' gazes. Xiao Chen's group's eyes. Xiao Chen Ant's group's group. "Let's move forward." Xiao Chen stood up and looked ahead. He said calmly, "Try to avoid all the ink cheelants as much as possible. That way, we can get out." "What alarmed these ink cheelants?" Jingyu asked curiously. "Smell." Jingyu pursed her lips and said, "An unfamiliar smell. If we get close, the ink cheelants will be alarmed." "So it's because of smell?" Jingyu frowned and looked at the others. She then turned to look at Shangguan Hongwen and Lu Miaoqiu, who were covered in mud. She suddenly understood why they were covered in mud. Where's the nearest quagmire? Looks like we need to take a mud bath. Jingyu turned to Shangguan Hongwan and asked. Chapter 893. After a while, the 100 or so people turned into mud monkeys. Let's go forward. Shangguan Hongwan led the way in front and led everyone to avoid all the ink cheelants with ease. Jingyu saw with her own eyes that there was an ink cheelan resting not far away. Everyone was so shocked that they almost ran away reflexively. Fortunately, they managed to control themselves. They lowered their bodies and followed Shangguan Hongwan's group around it. They continued moving forward. The journey was extremely slow and thrilling. We have to reach the bottom of the waterfall before it gets dark. Shangguan Hongwan squatted in the grass and rested for a while. Then he said to everyone, if we didn't find that waterfall when we were running away, I'm afraid we would have been torn apart by those black cheelants at night. Jingyu's mouth twitched. She swallowed her saliva and said, let's go. It's getting late. The crowd continued to follow Shangguan Hongwan's footsteps. These 100 or so people were like thieves, holding their breaths and not daring to make a single sound. They walked on the ground for a long distance, and the sky began to darken as they continued to move forward. We'll reach the waterfall if we keep going forward. Shangguan Hongwan took a deep breath and said, let's go this way. The group nodded and followed Shangguan Hongwan's footsteps. However, when Shangguan Hongwan led the way and jumped off a rock, the group jumped off one by one. But when they landed, they were stunned. They fell straight into a haystack. And in the haystack, fuck, why are you standing there like idiots? Run. Jingyu was so shocked that her soul almost left her body. Shangguan Hongwan led the way so well. He led them all into the nest of the ink kirans. In front of Jingyu's group, there were 2 or 3 ink kirans nestled in the haystack. They seemed to be resting or flirting. In any case, he was lying down with a relaxed look on his face. Jingyu's group landed arrogantly in front of the ink kirans. It was fine if one of them landed, but they landed one after the other. They were originally very careful. When they landed, the first thing they saw was the 2 gigantic black cheelants. At this moment, everyone's hearts were in a mess. Was this a joke? Save me. Jingyu stared dumbfounded at Zhan Qi, who had overtaken her in an instant. A drop of cold sweat dripped down her forehead. This fellow's strength was the greatest when it came to escaping. The 2 ink kirans behind Jingyu's group were completely enraged. They roared crazily and chased after Jingyu and Xiao Qin's group. Don't run around. Follow them and run. Jingyu looked at the people who wanted to scatter and run. Suddenly, her expression turned serious and she quickly shouted. The people behind her had just started moving. When they heard Jingyu shout, they quickly chased after them and did not dare to scatter. Oh my God! Jingyu took the time to look back. When she saw that the number of black cheelants chasing after her had increased from 2 to many in an instant, her eyes widened. She let out 2 strange cries and hurriedly quickened her pace. Chapter 894. Quick, quick, quick. The voice behind them kept urging them. Everyone was running happily. Holy shit. Sooner or later, I'll have to ride on you ugly things. Li Weiming cursed fiercely. He accidentally slowed down a little, and the black cheelan caught up with him instantly. Li Weiming was so shocked that he screamed and ran forward. Jingyu was angry and amused at the same time. After running for some distance, another black cheelan suddenly appeared in front of them. It was standing on a rock and walking in circles. Was it lost? Jingyu didn't know why, but this thought popped up in her mind. Her mouth twitched violently. She saw that the black cheelan heard the running here and turned its head. Then, as if it had discovered something very exciting, it rushed toward Jingyu and the rest without a word. Squat down! Jingyu glared and shouted. Everyone bent down as if they had received an order. Then, Jingyu looked up and saw the black cheelan fly over their heads. It landed on the ground with a perfect dog-eat-shit landing. Ha ha ha! This black cheelan is also an idiot. Everyone took the time to look sideways and burst into laughter. With this laughter, their running pace slowed down. In an instant, the black Qilin behind them closed the distance. Everyone was so shocked that they stopped laughing. The waterfall is just ahead. Go in quickly, Shangguan Hongwen shouted. Only then did everyone notice that there was a small path not far away. The roaring sound of the waterfall seemed to be coming as well. Everyone's eyes lit up. His footsteps quickened as he ran. Damn, didn't you say that you couldn't run anymore? One of them was still shouting that he couldn't run anymore. But when he heard about the waterfall, his feet moved faster than anyone else's. Ha ha ha, I can run all of a sudden. The man cheered and rushed straight ahead. Damn, that little bastard. That person's face darkened. How could he take care of him? Under Shangguan Hongwen's lead, the group suddenly passed through the waterfall and entered the waterfall. They were drenched in water and jumped into the waterfall. Only then did they discover that behind the waterfall was a completely different world. It was an empty cave. Few were safe. Those black Qilins all stood on the cliff and didn't dare to go near the water. It seemed that they had a natural fear of water. We ran until we died. The group of people were all lying on the cold ground like dead dogs. Just now, they were running with their lives on the line. They didn't even dare to be lazy. Ha ha ha, awesome. There was only excitement in some people's hearts. This feeling of life and death was what they had always pursued. At this moment, there was excitement in their eyes. There were only 100 people, but everyone's personality was so different. Jingyu picked up the water bottle and drank a mouthful of water. She finally felt comfortable and found a comfortable place to sit. Xiao Chun sat beside Jingyu and leaned slightly against the rock. The feeling of escaping from the black Qilin and surviving a disaster seemed to make the originally relaxed people feel different. This feeling was very strange. It was as if they had become a group. This feeling of living and dying together was very comfortable. Jingyu smiled at Xiao Chun. That smile made Xiao Chun tighten his grip on Jingyu's hand. Xiao Chun stared at Jingyu for a long time and finally said, I'll go with you? No. Jingyu rejected him without thinking. She pursed her lips and stared at Xiao Chun. Even if you can't do it, I have a way to escape. Chapter 896. No. Xiao Chun rejected firmly. Jingyu would never take the risk alone. Xiao Chun stared at Jingyu, not allowing her to reject him. Then, I can let you go, but you can't get close to me. Jingyu turned to Xiao Chan and said, You can watch me from afar and run with me if there's any danger. But you can't go near the ink Qilins with me. Before I tame them, you can't go near them. Xiao Chun stared at Jingyu's face for a while, then finally nodded slowly and said, Okay. In the dark night, two figures walked out of the cave silently and headed up the path. Jingyu's green eyes glimmered as she clearly saw the things on the cliff. Ink Qilins, there were ink Qilins everywhere. They seemed to love the dark night very much. They bathed in the moonlight and let out low and elegant cries. Jingyu quietly watched the black Qilins gather in the forest. She watched them snuggle together, and her heart trembled slightly. Jingyu glanced at Xiao Chun and signaled for Xiao Chun to wait there. She summoned Burial Flower and stood up slowly under the moonlight. A light breeze blew by and Jingyu's scent entered the noses of the ink Qilins. Instantly, all the ink Qilins were on alert, and their golden eyes stared dangerously at Jingyu. One after another, the black Qilins paced around Jingyu and surrounded her. All of them let out strange cries in unison. They seemed to be angry, but also seemed to be warning her. Jingyu stood quietly on the spot without moving at all. The flower burial snake coiled around Jingyu's body, raised its head high, and flicked its forked tongue. It seemed to be issuing a warning to the black Qilins that were approaching from all directions. The way he protected Jingyu made Xiao Chen, who was hiding in the dark, clench his fists slightly. He stared at the situation in front of him with his cold and dark eyes, which were frighteningly deep. Jingyu closed her eyes and remained silent for a long time. Jingyu could sense that she was listening to the enchanting's breathing and the cries coming from their throats. She was trying to discern the difference between the voices. Vaguely, Jingyu seemed to hear Zhonghua's voice. It clearly conveyed an emotion, a feeling of being protected, a feeling of being protected, a feeling of warning against the enchanting. It was so clear. I feel it. Jingyu's lips curled up slightly. She finally opened her eyes slowly. The moment Jingyu opened her eyes, one green and one gold, she glanced at all the enchanting around her with a deep gaze. The enchanting seemed to have sensed something and started to move around uneasily. Jingyu heard the cries of the enchanting. Chapter 897. Calling? Jingyu's heart trembled slightly. Why did she hear a call? What were these black cheelants calling for? Jingyu's eyes turned slightly serious. The originally quiet surroundings were once again in chaos at this moment. The wind blew the leaves, making rustling sounds. The black cheelants that suddenly became chaotic seemed to have lost control in an instant. What's going on? Jingyu's eyes were slightly surprised. These black cheelants were indeed chaotic, but in this chaos, Jingyu didn't feel any killing intent towards her at all. Xiao Chen, who was hiding at the side, was almost completely focused on the movement in front of him. He clearly felt the black cheelants' movements, which seemed to be attacking Jingyu. Xiao Chen's expression suddenly changed. His hands clenched tightly into fists. At this moment, he was so shocked that his breathing became softer, and he didn't dare to make any careless movements. Jingyu. Xiao Chen slightly lowered his breath, ready to rush out and take Jingyu away at any time. However, at this moment, while Jingyu was still thinking about why these black cheelants suddenly became restless, the circle of black cheelants surrounding her suddenly parted slowly to form a path. Jingyu looked at the parted path, and her heart trembled violently. Why did she have an inexplicable illusion that these black cheelants were like little brothers, and that the parting of the path must be to welcome the boss out? These black cheelants were already the size of tigers. If a boss came out, wouldn't it be the size of an elephant? When Jingyu thought of this, she swallowed her saliva in fear and nervously stared at the opening of the path. She stared at the path for a long time, but she didn't see any footsteps coming from it. Tap, tap. Finally, when Jingyu was at a loss, footsteps finally came from that place. The sound was quite clear. As soon as the footsteps came, all the black cheelants were like mice that had seen a cat, and all of them crouched down and made a slight sound from their throats. Respect? Jingyu clearly felt the respect these black cheelants had for these people from their movements, and they all retreated one by one. Jingyu looked at the black cheelants' movements and suddenly became more nervous. She swallowed her saliva silently. Even if the boss wasn't as big as an elephant, it was probably as big as a bear, which was definitely twice the size. Could she beat such a big black cheelant? Jingyu silently weighed the situation and looked at the road around her. There was only one thought in her mind. If the negotiation failed, she could only run. She had better observe which direction to break through. While Jingyu's imagination was running wild, a shadow finally appeared on the side of the road. Under the moonlight, the shadow was very long. Jingyu knew it was a big deal when she saw the shadow. It seemed that a big deal had really come. Chapter 898. Thud. With the last sound of footsteps, the figure hidden in the darkness was finally revealed. Meow. A clear meow was heard. The eyes in Jingyu's hand suddenly widened at this moment. Her heart, which had been tensed up, almost stopped beating at this moment. That's right. She was so scared that she stopped beating. Meow? Meow. Meow. Jingyu was so shocked by the situation that she didn't even realize that the dagger in her hand had fallen. At this moment, Jingyu stared at the scene in front of her in horror. This was the legendary boss? This should be the mighty and majestic enchanting that was like an elephant or a bear. Who the hell could tell her where this little black cat came from? In front of Jingyu, on the path where the beast had retreated, A miniature version of the enchanting the size of a kitten sat in front of Jingyu. A pair of round, emerald eyes stared curiously at Jingyu. Meow? The little enchanting let out a clear meow. 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 Holy shit. What the hell was going on? Meow? Jingyu was too tired to watch the little cat raise its head and stare at her. She squatted down silently and looked at the little enchanting with a conflicted expression. Immediately, the little thing seemed to understand her and kept meowing. A drop of cold sweat dripped down Jingyu's forehead. Where did this cat come from? Jingyu stared at the little thing in front of her and blinked. The little enchanting seemed to understand Jingyu's words and jumped up unhappily. In the blink of an eye, the little guy jumped onto Jingyu's shoulder. Aya! Jingyu was startled and jumped up instantly. The little black Chielin's foot paused on Jingyu's shoulder for a moment before it jumped down again. Roar, roar, roar. Jingyu's actions didn't matter. After she threw the little thing off, the beasts started howling excitedly. They seemed to be unhappy with Jingyu's actions. When Zhonghua saw that his shoulder had been tainted by someone else, he let out a terrifying warning. The little enchanting saw Zhonghua, and its fur stood on end. It let out a shrill meow. The bigger enchanting started howling as well. Their voices were so loud in the silent night. The roars of the bigger enchantings made Xiao Qian unable to sit still. He could clearly sense the viciousness in the eyes of the enchantings. In fact, the viciousness in the eyes of the enchantings was directed at Zhonghua. They were cheering for their boss. However, in Xiao Qian's eyes, he thought that these big guys were going to harm Jingyu. How could Xiao Qian sit still? He appeared almost instantly and landed beside Jingyu. He raised his hand and pulled Jingyu into his arms. The little enchanting was still eyeing Zhonghua covetously. When it saw Xiao Qian pulling Jingyu into his arms, it was instantly enraged. That feeling sent a clear message to Jingyu. It was as if something that belonged to him had been snatched away by someone else, and then the anger was conveyed. Chapter 899. Oh no! Jingyu's expression changed, and she pulled Xiao Qian and shouted, "Run!" Jingyu and Xiao Qian ran away almost instantly. Jingyu scooped Zhonghua up, and just as they started running, the little enchanting behind them let out a sharp meow. The angry meow seemed to be transmitted to every corner of the forest. In just a few breaths, the forest was filled with low growls. It seemed that all the enchantings were chasing after Jingyu and Xiao Qian at this moment. What the fuck? We poked a hornet's nest. Jingyu suddenly regretted it so much that her intestines turned green. She didn't dare to stop at all, and she followed Xiao Qian and ran desperately in the forest. From time to time, enchanting would run out to block their way, and Jingyu and Xiao Qian were so shocked that they hurriedly ran away as if they were obstacles. The enchantings chased after them ferociously, as if Jingyu had killed their whole families. They were chasing us during the day. Were they chasing us for fun? Jingyu was completely stunned by the scene. These black enchantings were really fierce in their pursuit. Compared to the way they chased during the day, they were chasing for fun during the day. Jingyu was almost out of breath. With such a big commotion outside, everyone in the waterfall was naturally awakened. When they woke up and saw that Jingyu and Xiao Qian were gone, there was a commotion in the crowd. Let's go out and take a look. Xiang Tian and Shangguan Hongwen looked at each other, then carefully ran out of the waterfall. They lay down at the bottom of the cliff and squinted to see what was going on above. Everyone lay down and looked at the situation in front of them with the help of the moonlight. However, they were shocked when they saw it. What the fuck? What did they do? Li Weiming looked at the situation in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. Countless enchantings were chasing after Jingyu and Xiao Qian crazily in the forest. They lay down at the edge of the cliff silently, watching Jingyu and Xiao Qian run for their lives while countless enchantings chased after them. Jingyu and Xiao Qian seemed to want to break out of the encirclement, so they kept dodging to the side. However, the enchantings didn't give them a chance. Therefore, Jingyu and Xiao Qian were running in circles on the spot. Everyone looked at the two people running in circles around the forest with black lines on their faces and almost laughed out loud. Look at them, haha. She covered her mouth to stifle her laughter. In everyone's eyes, Jingyu and Xiao Chun were jumping up and down to avoid the ink cheelants. They looked as if they were possessed by monkeys. Ha ha ha. They really look like monkeys. Smiles appeared in everyone's eyes as they looked at the two groups of people chasing after each other. At such a time, they were actually laughing. What did you do that would incur the wrath of men and gods? Shangguan Linglan looked at the speechless scene in front of him and twitched his mouth. He looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chun with a conflicted expression, then turned his head and asked, could it be that she killed all the parents of the ink cheelants? Li Weiming didn't know if his brain had gone haywire, but he silently spat out this sentence. Chapter 900. Are you out of your mind? Zhang Qi's mouth twitched when he heard that. He turned to look at Li Weiming and asked, how can one's stomach give birth to so many ink cheelants? How do you know it's impossible? Have you given birth to one before? Li Weiming turned to look at Zhang Qi silently and asked. Zhang Qi's face darkened when he heard Li Weiming's words. He gritted his teeth and glared at Li Weiming. He looked like he wanted to eat Li Weiming alive. Shangguan Linglan and Lu Miaoqiu looked at the two people in front of them helplessly. Why did they quarrel everywhere they went? What do we do now? Looking at the situation, even if we want to help, we might not be able to. Shangguan Linglan turned to look at Shangguan Hongwan and Xiang Tian with a puzzled look in his eyes. Let's see what's going on first. Shangguan Hongwan frowned slightly and said, these ink cheelants won't be able to do anything to the 9th emperors and the 9th imperial concubine for now. Shangguan Hongwan was calm. He squatted on the spot and observed the situation in front of him silently. While everyone was cheering, Jingyu and Xiao Qian, who were running, were about to go crazy. These ink cheelants were simply going to die. They couldn't shake them off at all. Moreover, they didn't let them break out of the encirclement. They just chased after them ferociously. Jingyu was completely enraged by the chase. That's enough. Jingyu suddenly turned around and jumped down from the tree trunk. She glared at the ink cheelants in front of her furiously. Her eyes, one gold and one green, emitted a strong light. It was as if there was an extremely strong aura of suppression. She ruthlessly crushed the ink cheelants. Roar! All the ink cheelants had a look of horror in their eyes. They looked at Jingyu, who was standing in the forest. Her pair of different colored eyes made all the ink cheelants stop in their tracks and take a step back. A woo meow. On top of the head of a large ink cheelan, the small ink cheelan showed its body. When it saw Jingyu's angry expression, it seemed to be very displeased. This feeling made Jingyu very uncomfortable. Jingyu could clearly feel the little guy's displeasure. It seemed to be having a lot of fun chasing after them. Now that Jingyu suddenly resisted, it was like a pet being teased by its owner and suddenly getting angry. Of course, its owner would be displeased. This little thing had categorized Jingyu as its own. At this moment, it was staring at Jingyu. Haha. Jingyu's eyes flashed with an intense coldness. In Jingyu's chest, an emotion called anger surged. Jingyu stared fixedly at the little black cheelan. Her different colored eyes rolled slightly, and the golden and green eyes instantly turned into a resplendent golden color. You want to dominate me? Jingyu stared coldly at the little ink cheelan, and the corners of her mouth curved into a cold smile. At this moment, Jingyu seemed to have sensed something and slowly walked towards the ink cheelan. Do you really think it's up to you to decide whether you're going to submit to me or I'm going to submit to you? Jingyu's golden eyes stared coldly at the little guy. The golden light in her eyes was very intense. A little ink cheelan dares to order me around? Jingyu's cold words seemed to be uttered very calmly, but they seemed to have a special ability that exploded in everyone's hearts. It carried an irresistible pressure that could not be ignored. Chapter 901. Ow! Meow! The black cheelan seemed to be angered by Jingyu's words. The hair on its small body stood on end, and it let out a warning sound. Ha ha ha. Do you think you are invincible just because of these things? Jingyu laughed heartily. At this moment, Jingyu, who was surrounded, had an indelible arrogance. Her imposing manner was so tyrannical and shocking. The black Cheelants seemed to feel Jingyu's contempt. They let out low growls and paced restlessly, as if they were going to pounce on Jingyu and Xiao Chen at any time. Let's see who dares to move. Jingyu suddenly swung her sleeves and shouted. Her eyes exuded a strong and monstrous aura. In a trance, it seemed to have shocked the wind. The black Cheelants, who were originally impatient and wanted to make more moves, suddenly stopped. When they heard Jingyu shout, they were so frightened that they trembled all over. They lowered their heads nervously and whimpered. The small black Cheelan seemed to be very angry when it saw this scene. It let out a series of meows, and then its body suddenly flashed and pounced on Jingyu at an incomparable speed. It seemed to want to subdue Jingyu. The small black Cheelan's speed was so fast that it was comparable to Xiang Tian's speed. It might even be faster than Xiang Tian's speed. Its body seemed to be in front of Jingyu in an instant. Originally, Jingyu felt that its speed was very fast. However, for some reason, the moment the black Cheelan jumped up, Jingyu's golden eyes seemed to have sensed something. In Jingyu's eyes, that incomparable speed seemed to have been buffered. Jingyu clearly identified the trajectory of the black Cheelan's attack. Then, when it was in front of her, she accurately reached out and grabbed its neck. In Jingyu's eyes, her action was so casual and simple. However, in the eyes of outsiders, they were stunned by Jingyu's move. Hiss! This speed! Li Weiming was so shocked that he almost fell off the cliff. He stared dumbfoundedly at Jingyu, who was holding the black Cheelan in one hand and a dagger in the other. He was dumbfounded. I can't do it. Xiang Tian's eyes were also full of horror. Everyone had seen the scene just now, and he had also seen it clearly. If it had been him, Xiang Tian, who had always been known for his speed, would have deeply surrendered at this moment. When everyone heard Xiang Tian's words, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. No one expected that this woman, who was said to have strange pupils, would have such a terrifying skill. Burp! Jingyu's hand tightened almost instantly. She tightly grabbed the black Cheelan's hand, causing the black Cheelan to be extremely frightened. Its pair of green eyes stared at Jingyu in horror, and it let out a strange scream. It seemed that it didn't expect that it would be caught by Jingyu so casually. At this moment, this terrible thought frightened it. In the next second, Jingyu's tightened hand made it feel suffocated. This feeling of imminent death, as a beast, almost instantly began to struggle and fear. It could almost clearly feel that Jingyu had a strong killing intent towards it. It was not a threat, nor was it an act. She really wanted to kill it. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.